Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room. Happy International Anti-Corruption Day to everybody who's tuned in this morning. We're looking back and taking stock. That's what we're doing with the conversation with Philip Kagusha from the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Taking stock of the fight against corruption. They're celebrating even today as they mark this day, the AACC. They just won some cases yesterday. Recovery of a 700 million shillings piece of land belonging to the Kenya School of Law. Some more recoveries in Mtwapa in Kilifi County. The jailing of a police officer over taking of a bribe of 50,000 shillings. The police officer has been jailed for a year, and more. That is doing some good news. Okay, let's take stock of what has happened in terms of corruption now from the other side. Those who have successfully gone ahead with corruption this particular year.
Successfully. Yes.
Successfully. Participated in corruption this year.
What do you mean, Eric? What do you mean that they've successfully participated?
So we are looking at the success of the EACC in fighting corruption.
Yes.
So now let's look at the success of the corrupt.
In putting their hands in the cookie jar,
In
eating the
putting their
cookies
hands
and
in the
wiping
cookie.
their mouths.
Yes. Remember Jack Ma's things came, they went. Remember we have KEMSA. Remember during this whole time that we are fighting COVID-19, there's a lot that has happened. And that is why if you look to the two houses of parliament, the National Assembly and the Senate, you will find very many sittings right now because they are trying to establish what has happened. For example, several sittings that have happened over KEMSA. The Senate has had sittings over KEMSA. The National Assembly Health Committee has had a sittings over KEMSA and produced a report. Currently, the Public Investments Committee, or is it the Public Accounts Committee of the National Assembly, is conducting sittings and hearings over KEMSA. More and more. The Senate, during this fight against COVID-19, came up with an ad hoc committee where the senators decided, you know what, as a house, let's look at how we get to understand the fight against COVID-19, what is required, then come up with a report that we shall recommend to the government. This is what you need to do so that we can effectively fight COVID-19. That committee was set up, the ad hoc committee. It was formally chaired by the Nairobi senator, what's his name? Johnson Sakaja. Yep. And then you know what Johnson Sakaja did, unfortunately, and he said, okay, because of that, I take responsibility. And now I shall step down as the chair. The chair then was given to Senator Sylvia Kasanga, who is joining us now on the line. And the conversation we want to have with her now is fighting COVID-19 in the midst of a pandemic and the role that Parliament has as the watchdog, as the people who should be keeping the national executive in check. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Latif. How are you this morning?
Very well, thank
you. Happy Anti-Corruption Day to you all there in studio.
Well, thank you very much.
I don't know if we say thank you or...
Actually, I'm still sorting this thing out in my
How
head.
we're celebrating this day.
Yes.
I'm also not sure.
Because the word corruption and celebration in one sentence...
Anti-corruption.
It does sound
If you don't
crazy.
put anti, then
Yes.
it changes the whole the meaning.
Okay, fine. Okay.
So if you say anti, then you can say happy. Happy anti-corruption.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Senator.
Thank you so much, Latif, for having me.
Asante sana. The Parliament has a big role in the fight against corruption. Parliament is the one, and I'm talking Parliament as a whole, both the Senate and the National Assembly. Parliament is the one that has a lot of oversight, has the oversight role over the executive. Parliament has a budget-making role over the executive. Parliament then also looks at all these state departments and commissions which report to Parliament and give their a report of what they have done and what then they need, the kind of support that they need going forward. Looking at all that and looking at the state of Parliament, can you say that Parliament has played that role effectively so far?
Oh, well, Latif, I think it's a touch and go situation. And I've said severally in many platforms that it is my view that Parliament has not done enough and in effectively failing Kenyans, because we are not doing what we are supposed to be doing fully and, wholeheartedly for that matter. And let me just first correct something you just said. The ad hoc committee wound up its functions, by the way. As ad hoc, we wound up our functions late October, and were given an extension of 1 month to receive reports from the Auditor General that we had requested for in in September, we had requested the Auditor General to do an audit on all the counties on their use of the COVID funds that had been sent from the national government as well as from their supplementary budgets, a report which we are yet to receive, and also just to highlight some of the frustrations that we also encounter in Parliament. But just to answer your question, being the oversight, having the oversight mandate over national government and over counties, whether Parliament is stretched or not, there's still a lot more Parliament needs to do. In fact, it's with a lot of frustration that we find ourselves in the debt level that the country is experiencing right now, which we shall have a lot of impact. Come later this year and early next year, we shall really feel the pain of the debt level. And part of the reason is because Parliament okayed the executive to go ahead with the spending. And you would have expected a situation where Parliament is robust over this issue and they'll put their foot down and say, no, we have to learn to live within our means. It means the government then has to cut expenditure here and there and to curb corruption, because we know a lot of the money that are borrowed are being eaten, quote unquote, through corrupt means. And this issue of high-level graft, for me, I've grappled with it. I didn't understand it as I was growing up. I didn't understand it through my professional career because, there's corruption of procurement officers, fiddling of civil servants, crooked businessmen, shady bankers, and, just thieving politicians. But those happen in any form of, modern community, you see that. But the high level graft that we are experiencing in this country is something I've grappled with. And, I've been reading a lot of articles, and there's one particular article that caught my eye. And this was the AFRICOG state capture report, and the former Auditor General, Edward Oko. And you can trust and you can feel something that he says, because we know the role he played when he was the chair of that watchdog. And you remember how frustrated he was. And when he was launching this report, it's called the state capture report, he did talk about something called budgeted corruption. Because sometimes you wonder, where is this money going? Where is this money going? I mean, that report, it says it very clearly. Budgeted corruption. Where budget is inflated by monies that are earmarked to be stolen. And then, also characterize the budgeting process as a highway. And the projects are the exit lanes now where the eating can happen once the projects have been rolled over. So what then can Parliament do in such situations? You realize that then we have to take up the audit of projects a lot more thoroughly, a lot more seriously. So when we meet in our committees, and we are analyzing how projects have been, tendered and how they have, they have been rolled out. And in the end, what is the exit report looking like? Those are now things it looks like Parliament has to sit over extremely thoroughly. But I'll tell you, in my experience now in Parliament, we don't have the complete capacity. I mean, every county is rolling out projects. So imagine now how will 47 senators oversight each and every single project that is happening at county level. National Assembly, on the other hand, is oversighting the executive. Each and every project that is going on. How is that even possible? So we rely on the instruments that, the Constitution has set up. And you can see, in fact, I was just listening to the gentleman before, the anti-corruption gentleman, and you can hear there are some areas where there's a bit of frustration. I'll tell you on our part, for instance, under the ad hoc committee, when it became clear that we needed to look into how the use of funds has happened, because, of course, there were already reports and, whistleblowers. When we talk to stakeholders and people in the counties, you can hear, snippets of frustrated Kenyans saying, no, we know the money has not been used appropriately. Or when you hear the forum of the county assemblies forum telling us that they've not had an opportunity to oversight the funds that the counties are utilizing for COVID, then we have a serious problem. And we call on the Auditor General and say, come, you're the person who has these instruments. Can you go and give us these reports in the shortest time possible?
So Kasanga, I have to ask you though. I mean, I can hear that you're saying that there is in your heart of hearts, you have the desire to fight this corruption, right? But are we seeing a direct calling out of some of the cases where there is a problem? If we give the example of the MES scandal, we had one of your colleagues here in this room who basically told us that it would be difficult to come out a solution because there are interested parties who are sitting on some of these committees themselves and are then not able to call out people or call out their own colleagues who have their hands in the proverbial cookie jar because they don't want to call out their body. I mean, it sounds so simple, but that's what we are looking at now. So even if somebody who is in the role of oversight, you have your friend who may be in a difficult quote-unquote position, but then you're not going to call it out. So you can imagine if you who's sitting at the place of power, quote-unquote power, is not able to call out something that you see, how much more the Kenyan who is on the periphery waiting for you to do something.
But even more significantly,
so it's the self-interest, not another huge block that you have to deal with.
You see, if the optics of it are not very positive, if from the perspective of the Mwananchi, because then all you require is the mention, not the evidence provided, just mention of someone who is in parliament, and the optics are that they are complicit, that people who are in that position are part and parcel of the problem that we have. So it's like asking the corrupt to investigate themselves. Because even as you say you are limited, we agree you are, but even within those limitations, what is this outstanding thing that you could say the Senate has done, apart from impeaching one or two governors?
You know, in the end, Parliament will give a report. At the end of every committee work we do, we give a report that is adopted in the floor of the House. And more often than not, where corruption has been highlighted as an issue, even when you look at the MES report, and even if you look at some of the exit reports that we have as ad hoc committee, and even the work that is ongoing right now around KEMSA and all that, in the end, Parliament will give these recommendations, which will still require the machinery of our constitution to still pick it up and take the investigations to the next level. So I always say that even if colleagues cannot call out each other, in the end, even the Auditor General, for instance, or the DPP, in the end, they'll have to pick up these reports and they will have to do now further investigations so that they can introduce it now to a court of law, for instance.
But do
and
they,
it is in those other
sorry to
mechanisms where
interrupt you, but
can be called out.
do they actually? Because the thing is that as we are looking at it from here, a report has been given, again, using the example of the MES. Senate, or rather the committee, rejects that report and says, no, further investigation needs to be done. Certain names have to be brought out. Otherwise, we are not going to accept this. But you know what it looks like to Kenyans? That report has gone up in smoke. Nobody's going to touch it again. Millions, billions of shillings have gotten lost. And it's just another case that has gone down the drain. That's what it looks like to the rest of us.
In fact, Senator, you give a perfect example when, with reference to the debt that the country currently has, because I take the view that oversight means not just assenting to something that has been brought before you, but and questioning it, but putting a halt to it. I mean, for instance, what were the reasons? I mean, I'm sure there were reasons. Why did Parliament raise our capacity to borrow to the trillions that we now have? What were the sound reasons behind this thinking? Because I'm taking the positive view that there was some sound logic behind it. What was the logic behind it?
I think I can't speak very authoritatively around that particular issue. It happened mostly at the National Assembly. But I can tell you the fear of the government, won't have money to run. Do you want to grind the government to a halt? You don't want to do that. So let's allow them, to borrow a little more, and then they can now put their house in order. I think some of the conversations I had around the members of Parliament were around that. You can't let the government, grind to a halt, which is honestly unfortunate, because in my view, we should have had a situation where we are telling the government, no, go and come back and tell us, how you're going to live within the means that, the country has, rather than taking us to that good level.
I take it that people in Parliament, Senator, are intelligent people. From what I've observed, there are people who have had a sterling reputation in the careers that they have had. But surely, everything that we're seeing now is that it didn't help. All we did was postpone the inevitable. The government is grinding to a halt, as we see, right before our very eyes. So what exactly did we help? What did Parliament really do to help?
We didn't help. That is the truth. No need to quote or sugarcoat it. Honestly, it didn't help. Like you said, we have postponed the problem. And now, we're in a serious situation. Just the other day, we were launching Council of Governors was launching the policies for jump-starting the economy in the counties. And when I was given just a very short, opportunity to speak, I said, unless we build trust back in the country by fighting corruption and fighting it in a manner that can be visible and seen and starting from the most higher levels, then what are we talking about? And of course, I mentioned about healthcare. I mean, you can't jumpstart an economy when you have a broken healthcare situation, because that is something we must speak to on a daily basis, because that's what we are, encountering as a country. But I'll just come back and tell you that right now, with all the investigations that are going around KEMSA and the PPEs, and you can see really Parliament has been seized of it, because it's a good opportunity for first Parliament to demonstrate and show Kenyans that really, if we apply ourselves, then it is possible we can get to the bottom of things. Unfortunately, things move a little too slowly. In my view, it's a bit frustrating that the pace at which everything moves is a bit slow. But you can see, some of the highlights of some of the meetings that are ongoing. Now, I'm not, my committee is no longer sitting in those investigations. We handed that over back to the Health Committee. And you can see, the process that the Health Committee is going through, both at National Assembly and at Senate, including the Public Accounts Committees. They've all been seized of this issue. And we can begin to see then Parliament doing what it's supposed to be doing, throughout its course of life. And that gives us a little hope that at least,
to what end?
That's where the frustration comes in as well at the same time, because we can see all these sittings. It's not the first time. The Public Accounts Committee of the National Assembly over the very many years has had sittings and questioned very many parastatals and other state agencies on how they are spending their money. Similar to the Public Investments Committee. If we just look at what is happening in terms of investigations over the Senate, over KEMSA, the Senate has an investigation. The National Assembly has 2 investigations over the same issue. Health Committee has produced a report. As that is going on, Public Accounts is sitting right now. It will produce its report. Senate Health Committee is sitting right now, investigating the same matter. It will produce its report. Those are 3 reports over the same issue that are going to the National Assembly and the Senate. From where people sit, especially looking at what we just saw with the MES scandal and the committee that had been set up to investigate that, you can understand the frustration of the population when they think, okay, this is another whitewashing exercise. This is another exercise maybe where people will be called, they'll be summoned, they'll be questioned, and maybe at the back, there are some politicians who are playing dirty games by saying, okay, ukinipatia hii, sitaweka jina yako kwa report. These are not unfounded thoughts and fears of the people. How can we assure the people that if a matter goes before any committee of the Senate or any committee of the National Assembly, or indeed the entire House, that this can actually be prosecuted faithfully?
Well, a committee will perform depending on the chairpersons, mostly the chairperson who drives the agenda of the committee. So it's as good as the agenda of the chairperson on how far and wide the committee will go. But when it comes to the many processes that are now happening for the COVID during this KEMSA hearing, I'll say that in fact it's good that we have several committees that are seized of this issue. So in the end, we shall compare the reports that shall come. And I doubt if we have several reports coming, those wash questions, I don't think will arise in this particular case, like we saw in the MES report, which a lot of senators, of course, were very disappointed, and there's a demand that it should be brought back through the Health Committee for, to be introduced. The question should be reintroduced back into the House because, of course, we were not happy with that report in the end. So I think the fact that there are many committees handling this thing in itself is not a bad thing entirely. It may sound repetitive. It may sound like a waste of resources with all these committees sitting and the same people going into each of the committees and answering questions. But you have seen also what has happened when you prod a little bit deeper, actually is when you get these questions, people crack and the truth begins to come out. And I think you can hear from some of the investigations that are going on, you can now hear people speaking more boldly on what was happening in the backdrop of things. So I don't think it should be looked at in a negative way. I think we should just say it's a step forward. I would look at it from that point of view, that it's a step forward. And just to encourage Kenyans, the fight against corruption and the high level of corruption we've seen in this country, it will take some time. It will take some time, and it will require everyone to pitch in. In fact, I think it was here where I called in one time when I had the Kenya Medical Association. The new CEO was speaking, I think, to yourself about his involvement and how the KMA is involved with government, and that they may have an idea about the COVID billionaires. That was at the beginning of our investigation. And I called into the studio and I said, if you know, why is it that you've not reached out to the committee, yet we are looking for these things? And then now that begs the question on the role of, say, private sector or even just as citizens when it comes to such issues of high-level corruption, because it's being done amongst ourselves. We know the companies that are doing these things, but we refuse to call them out. And, a time is coming when we must all rise up, even as citizens, and begin to call out even the private sector players.
Do you think it could have anything to do with fear, or not even fear, or reluctance? Because Kenyans have seen the way in which things have been handled in the past. So coming from them, even though they have any information and they pass it forward, they have their belief that nothing will actually be done about this. Based on the things that we've talked about now, there's interest, there's self-interest, there's interest of colleagues, and there's committee after committee. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because then how can you convince Kenyans right now with what is currently going on, whereby we have this whole mess with the healthcare system, whether you're looking at MES, whether you're looking at COVID billionaires, millionaires, whatever they may be, whether you're looking at health workers and how they're not being taken care of. How can we convince Kenyans that this money that is said to have been lost, mismanaged, misappropriated is actually going to help or come back, or at least be accounted for? You see the thing? Somebody may have information, but they look at the way things have happened historically. Can we blame them completely for not bringing it forward?
No, you can't really blame Kenyans. Of course, there is the feeling of nothing is going to be done. But Kenyans, we have to have these conversations very regularly and say we have to start somewhere. Honestly, our country we are eating it completely and having nothing left for our children. And we must remember that we have to leave a country for the children. Otherwise, we can't move to other countries. This is our home. There's nowhere else we can go. So we have to start somewhere. And the associations that we all ascribe to as professionals also have a very key role to play. And I'll give you an example. For instance, our Architectural Association of Kenya, by the way, I'm an architect. When you get several complaints about a professional and they do their investigation, because they have their code of conduct, they have their, disciplinary committees. We have architects who are disciplined to the point where their licenses are withdrawn because, people have come and complained to the institute about this and that and that. So an investigation is done, and this particular person then is listed, and it is actually posted in our platform that so-and-so's license has been suspended. Now, isn't that a step forward? And I say, if every association was doing this sort of a thing, we would be at least moving forward. Yesterday, I had a conversation with one of the public prosecutors, the ones who are now helping government, the private ones who have come in to help government. And he said to me, the process of pinning one culprit down, of course, takes very long. Because it's our country, you're only guilty when, the whole thing has been done. That's when you can be declared you're guilty, and then you're fined. And he said to me, we have to be patient. Because I was asking him, why is it taking so long? Why does one prosecution take 8 to 10 years? He said, you have to be patient. But the important thing is when we catch one, what do we do about it? And he said, there's a bit of frustration because beyond just, charging them, what's the word? Fining, beyond just a fine. We should see a situation where there's a repatriation, of course, which I think is happening in one of the cases, the high-profile cases. But there should be also a jail term. It should not be this or this, a fine or a jail term. It should be actually both.
Yep.
It should be both because then the public needs to see that this person who did 1 or 2, 3 things, stole X amount of money, number one, has returned that money, and it will be returned in any form, whether it is properties or whatever, it will be repatriated from whatever length and breadth. Mm-hmm. But secondly, he has to serve jail time. We have to see this person go into jail. That way, then we begin to build the trust of Kenyans.
True.
And then we can get Kenyans to do what it is we want them to do, which is to rise up and speak out and, call out these issues when they come. And I agreed with the fellow, and he said, you people, because he was speaking to me as a parliamentarian, he said, you people must ensure this happens. But I don't know whether that's a parliament affair or it's a judicial affair, which needs to
add
change
it in
some
law.
of those
Don't
guidelines.
put it in the law as this or the other. Put it in law as this and the other. Senator, we want to thank you very much for speaking to us. Senator Sylvia Kasanga is the chair of the now defunct Senate Ad Hoc Committee on COVID-19. Nominated senator, very vocal and very active in the Senate. Asante sana for joining us and speaking to us this morning.
And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.